Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's intermission time.
Simon, when I am tasked with working out our itinerary for a holiday, one of the things that I often consider is what is the pop culture of the city that we're off to visit and how can I engage in that? Because, look, I'm a very pop culture orientated person, much like yourself. So, look, I haven't done a lot of overseas travel, like, maybe 4 or 5 countries. But my two sort of biggest trips are one trip to the US, where I went to Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and New York, and also once
Awesome.
Japan. Japan, I found from a pop cultural standpoint, outside of a few things like going to the Nintendo headquarters and a few little random things here and there, I had trouble latching into it because I'm not a huge
It's a
viewer
world unto
of
itself.
Japanese cinema or anime.
Oh, sure.
But and so like it's hard to connect to the pop culture very specifically, other than just sort of going, "Hey, isn't this a crazy game show we're watching in a love hotel on a Saturday night?" Do you want more detail on that? I'm not too sure.
No, we're good with that from that point.
It
Actually,
was just
no. Tell us more detail.
look. I mean, I can. It's less sexy than it sounds.
Bet it was.
Basically, we went to a hotel. The hotel was really, really lousy. We needed to find another hotel, so we jumped on. We found a hotel in Kyoto. Oh no, we were in Osaka that was nearby, and it was a pretty good price. So we, paid for the 2 nights, and we got there, and the hotel was just weird. And I realized it was actually a love hotel that they also rent out
Nice.
as like a standard hotel room.
By
But
the hour.
anyway,
Yep, good.
as a really cool couple who've been together for years and years do, we didn't use the Love Hotel as much for its intended purpose as much as we sat around watching Saturday night game shows on whatever the local Osaka NRK channel was. Anyway, Simon, let's get back to New York. When I went to New York, when I went to Los Angeles, when I went to DC, there was so much pop culture I was familiar with, and I was just coming across it everywhere. And it's just in the streets everywhere. These are well-known locations that people film in. I was in DC going for an early morning walk. I looked on Google Maps to make sure I wasn't getting lost or entering into an area where I probably just shouldn't. Anyway, I saw like on the Google Maps things saying Exorcist steps. And I'm like, wait a sec. The Exorcist was set in DC. These are probably the steps from The
Nice.
Exorcist. So I went walking to them and I'm like standing there on the steps from The Exorcist and it's like them. Something which I'd seen like on screen so many times before. But like I was there. It was really, really incredible.
It is very exciting. I know it's so
Yeah.
strange and nerdy to say so, but it's a buzz.
Like it really is a buzz. It's kind of cinema coming alive, and you're sort of standing in it. Stood in front of like the Ghostbusters like HQ in New York, which had a whole bunch
Oh,
of
it's great.
scaffolding around it, but it's still,
Yep.
kind of meaningful. Opportunities like that are aplenty when you go visiting in the US. Now, Simon, you went on a US trip in this last week between Friday when we recorded last week and Saturday morning as we record now. You spent most of the week in Los Angeles doing pop culture stuff.
Look, my friend, it was an incredible week. It was a spontaneous week. Barely a month ago, we were lounging on the couch, as is our wont in the weeks before winter kicks in, and popping up in my wife's Instagram account was an ad for the aforementioned Stop Making Sense, which was having a 40th anniversary screening at the Pantages Theatre in LA, which is the very theatre in which the concert was filmed over officially 3 days, but it was revealed at the Q&A on the night over 4 days. And the band, the Tina Weymouth, Chris France, Jerry Harrison, and David Byrne would be present for a Q&A after the film. At the time, it was going to be hosted by Fred Armisen, but for some reason he couldn't do it on the night. And Andy Richter, Conan O'Brien's offsider, stepped in and did the Q&A, and he made it a lot of fun. There was a bit of feeling at the time that some people thought, we would have rather had Fred Armisen because it would have been less comic and more music-y because of his music background. But Richter did a terrific job and made it very entertaining as well.
He's a pretty smart guy. I think he would have nailed it right.
Yeah. And he played the crowd and he played the band well. And he brought up the producer, Gary Gertzman, who was the late Jonathan Demme's producer throughout his career. So it made for an incredible night. And I'm jumping ahead in my running order here a little bit, but the crowd was seated and it was a sold out cinema, so 2 levels. I guess if you had to have a comparison, if you know the State Theatre in Sydney or maybe the Theatre Royal in Sydney here. I'm sort of Sydney focused on this. It's kind of like that. It's a two-tiered, old-school theatre. The early years of the Oscars were held at the Pantages Theatre. It's completely sold out. Everyone was seated. It came up. The 4K restoration looks stunning. A few songs in, people are cheering for it like it's a real concert film, but they're still in their seat. And then Burning Down the House kicks in, and one person stood up starting to dance on the far, as I look at the screen, to the far left, and then just this wave went across the audience of everybody standing up at one time. It took about 6 seconds for everybody in the audience to be on their feet when that song started, and they were dancing. And for most of the rest of the film, we were up off our seat and dancing along as if it was a real concert film. So that was an extraordinary movie-going experience. I have seen it twice this year. I saw it at the IMAX theatre as a 4K release when it was on the big screen there. Now I've seen this one. I now realise why it's considered arguably the greatest concert film of all time. The non-intrusive camera work, yet really personal sort of touch to the film that Demi captures is unique in concert movies. The building of the tension and the building of the rhythm of the putting the stage together and bringing the band members on, and what you referred to as it sort of building to a crescendo is never better sort of experience than with this massive crowd. So it was an extraordinary night. Some of the other stuff we saw through the week, and Can I
ask some questions? So the thing with Talking Heads is, look, politely, and I'm not like a huge Talking Heads guy, but I've suddenly, from being part of culture, I understand David Byrne, a bit of a dick as a person, and it's certainly been a bit of a fractious relationship. So my two questions are: one, did David Byrne seem like a bit of a dick on stage? And two,
he's not a dick at all. He's a genius.
Sorry, I didn't realize that if you're a genius, you can't also be a dick. In fact, I think you'll find that most geniuses generally tend to be antisocial, annoying dicks as people. But anyway, Simon, what was the relationship like between the band members on stage? Did it feel warm, or did it kind of feel like, they were kind of, there's definitely history there?
Well, Chris France, the drummer, and Tina Weymouth, the bass guitarist, are married, so they were warm with. They were generally familiar and warm with each other. Jerry Harrison, he's a San Francisco-based artist and producer now, and he was very much of a different school to the other three. I think the other three sort of held on to their sort of New York indie rebellious kind of roots a bit. David Byrne was an interesting character. He wasn't really open in his answering of the questions, and Andy Richter certainly tried to send him down some paths that would get a longer response, but he's always been that enigmatic, hard to predict artist. But his engagement with the audience, both in Stop Making Sense, and if you've seen American Utopia, which is his Broadway show and sort of reinterpretation of some of his great songs, you'll know what an incredible live performer he is and how that translates to the movie going experience, or the live experience initially, then the movie. So he still remained that kind of mumbly, kind of smaller version of himself on stage while the other band members took over. But no, there didn't seem to be any tension. There was laughing. I think they're all kind of fairly aged now. Certainly Chris France looks a little bit like a sort of chubby old fella. But they all seemed to have a good time. And Richter kept it very light, so there wasn't any pressing questions as well. So that was good. First night we were there, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, which opened in 2021 and which was like a church experience for me. 4 levels, I want to say, maybe 5 with the top one unopened yet, of just extraordinary movie history and movie memorabilia. The first night we were there, we got off the plane, we checked into the hotel suite after a fairly spectacular road rage incident on the freeway, in which a cab driver and a guy our cab driver and this other crazy guy kind of yelled and screeched in front of each other for about two miles. But we got changed and then went to a screening of a 70mm presentation of Boogie Nights in the David Geffen Theatre, which is the largest of the Academy Museum screening rooms. And it was extraordinary to see an original 70mm print of this film My takeaways from it were I can't remember who won the supporting actor Oscar that year, but it should have been Burt Reynolds. His performance has only grown immeasurably with age since the first time I saw this, and a couple of times I've seen it on the small screen since. It is a technical masterpiece, this film. I don't think it's a perfect film. As a critic, I look at it now and say, okay, well, that sort of overstretched that bit, and maybe that was kind of there were characters and there were moments which I thought were a little bit manufactured, but there are moments of perfection in the film. And that all came across in this Boogie Nights screening. So, which was our first experience at the Academy Museum. From there, we went back the next day.
Just echoing, thumbs up on Boogie Nights. Like every time I see that movie, it just gets better and better. Like I just think it's an incredible piece of cinema.
And I remember Roller Girl being a bigger part of it, but I'm a total Heather Graham nut, so maybe that were just the moments that stuck. She disappears for big parts of the film, but the moments she's in are extraordinary. And oh god, the use of music, not just the classic music of the 70s, but when the movie starts to take a really dark turn and gets into the videotape takeover of the porn industry in the 80s, and they start using things like Nina's 99 Luftballons or Rick Springfield's Jesse's Girl, the two songs that come up when they're in Alfred Molina's drug den. That's just an edgy, shocking sequence that still to this day is amazing bit of filmmaking. To think of a young filmmaker like Paul Thomas Anderson having the balls to just pull off some of these long tracking shots and rich sort of composition of frames is just amazing. So I walked away as a critic thinking, yes, there are some issues that I have with it as a critic now, but I also was able to appreciate it a whole lot more for some of the stuff I saw on the big screen in 70mm. The David Geffen Theatre is just a stunning room to watch a movie in. Then you have the Sidney Poitier Grand Lobby, which is the downstairs. From there, you go into the Steven Spielberg or the Spielberg family screening room, where you see this big presentation of Dijkstraflex, which is the camera equipment that was developed for Star Wars, and you see the model of the Millennium Falcon and the X-Wing that we used in Star Wars, the John Waters Pope of Trash exhibition, the Pedro Almodovar exhibition, a special screening room which looked at vertical cinema, which is the cinema that's the new wave of cinema that's coming from using phones. Plus, there are just huge exhibitions on all aspects of The Godfather and on animation and sci-fi and famed director Agnes Varda. So this turned into a 7-hour day, maybe 6.5-hour day for us, just walking between these amazing floors at the museum. So when
I was in LA, I did the Warner Brothers studio tour, which is the better studio tour of most of them that are around, as far as I understand. But at the very end of it, they take you into a little museum type thing, which I got to see the cape that Christopher Reeve wore in the first Superman movie. I held an Academy Award. There were just lots of cool little moments. Was there one or two bits of ephemera that you got to see on display that really just knocked your socks off?
Oh my God. We saw the taxidermied head of the horse that was in The Godfather. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
As part of the animation science fiction, or what was called Inventing Worlds exhibition, there was a room that had and these were all the exact shooting models. They're not recreations like you see in some museums. These are all the ones used on set. We saw the teddy bear from AI. We saw the suit, the fish suit from Shape of Water. The original. So the 3PO costume with the red arm, which I think was from the most recent Star Wars films.
Yeah.
Original UFOs from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The Harley Quinn outfit. An original Gremlin. So stuff like that for a nerd like me was just extraordinary. The Almodovar exhibition, which featured, which was literally like an art gallery, like giant LED screen representations of his films and stuff like that, plus original Pinocchios, and it really did go on and on forever. What was funny was the Godfather room, where you have these huge sections dedicated to the first and second film, and then you have a little plaque on the wall saying, reinterpreting The Godfather Part 3 Legacy. It was the only spot in the whole room that they gave to The Godfather Part 3. Where maybe it's time for reassessment, said the plaque on the wall. And I was like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. But it was, to see the rooms were extraordinary. Very quickly, a couple of the other screenings we went to.
Just on a very similar note, Simon, if you go to the Museum of the Moving Image in New York, there's also just a whole bunch of like amazing props and costumes that you can see. Amongst them, I remember seeing the doll that was used in The Exorcist. So when they needed to get Linda Blair's head to turn around, you can see that on display there. There's a whole bunch of Muppets that you can find on display there as well. And I'm just trying to find my photos from when I was there. Chewbacca's head. I saw there was some Planet of the Apes ape costume business going on there. Suits from Miami Vice, just a whole bunch of really cool things. And that's kind of the cool thing about checking out some of these US-based museums, in that like they've got all of the stuff and they treat it properly seriously, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and I will put up on our Facebook page me accepting an Oscar. I did get to hold a real Oscar. We were such movie nerds. We paid $10.
The joke, Simon, when people accept their Academy Award used to always be, this is always heavier than it looks. But like they are.
They're very heavy, yeah. They really are. We both paid $10 each to have ourselves accepting an Oscar in front of an Oscar audience, and I'll put that video up on our Facebook page. It's could have been the highlight of the trip. We stumbled across the week, what's known as Bleak Week. The American Cinematheque puts on a week of thoroughly depressing and horrible movies that have grown in stature since they were released. Director Jeff Kanew, Kanew, who I only knew from Revenge of the Nerds and Gotcha, two of the sort of sillier films of the early to mid-'80s. He made a film in 1979 called Natural Enemy, starring Hal Holbrook as a husband who shoots his family, basically. And he was there for a presentation at the Los Feliz Cinema and spoke at length and very entertainingly about how this film almost ruined his career and why it's so odd seeing it on the big screen now all these years later. We went back to the Academy Museum and went to the Ted Mann Theatre. Ted Mann was the man who was the creative force behind Mann's Theatre, one of the biggest theatre chains over the last century in the US, for a screening of Real Women Have Curves, which would have been in your sort of late 90s, early 80s indie film sort of absorption.
I don't think I know it at all.
You what, sorry?
I don't think I know it.
Oh, okay. It was the debut of America Ferrera, and director Patricia Cordoza was on site to say what a they could tell there was a star in the making there with her. And having seen the film, I saw it once back in the day, but I think I did. I can't remember. But that was a great night at the theatre. To your point about visiting great old movie sites and the Exorcist steps and stuff like that, our experience over there was going to the Bradbury Building in downtown LA, which was used for the staircases in Blade Runner. The scenes where Rutger Hauer is running up the stairs and taking the lift up to finally confront Deckard in Blade Runner, and lit in that incredible Ridley Scottish kind of way. We were able to go there and visit that. We visited, but didn't see movies at Tarantino's New Beverly Cinema, Vista Cinema. We went to the Alamo Draft House, and we took a very expensive Uber out to Glendale, an outer suburb, to visit the Vidiots pop-up video store out there, which is an amazing collection of DVDs and videos from back in the day. And then we had drinks as we waited for our plane to come. The last thing we did was had drinks at the Chateau Marmont, where everybody was very nicely dressed, and I stumbled in there in my smelly old shorts and crappy old T-shirt and settled in for non-alcoholic pineapple juice, and my wife had an Aperol Spritz, living it up in a true LA fashion at the famous or infamous Chateau Marmont. Hey, you want to hear my celebrity encounters very quickly?
Okay, one second. With the Chateau Marmont, can you just sort of walk in there like it's a bar, or is there...
Oh, yeah. You go upstairs and you sort of nod to the two very good-looking wannabe movie stars at the front of the building, and then you just catch the lift up to the first floor and you go out to the reception desk, but then a man meets you and says, "How can I help you?" looking you up and down. And you say, "Oh, we're just here for a drink." So he takes you through to the sunny outer deck where you sit with a whole lot of other people having what looked like important meetings. A group of gentlemen sat down next to us who looked like fairly big sports types of people. I didn't recognize who they were, but one was like 7 foot tall. And as soon as they sat down, everybody else in the outer sort of area had a look at them. So they might have been looking at us. I don't know. Had a look at things. So that was interesting. 3 significant celebrity encounters. Coming out of the Stop Making Sense screening, we were just getting our bearings on our telephones right, or ordering an Uber, and walking right up to us and right past us was one Dan Florrick, the police captain from Law and Order. So that was that was a big deal.
Also a regular recurring cast member in LA Law back in the day.
Exactly right. Yes.
Yeah.
Out at Glendale, which is really just on at the Vidiot store, really just on the corner of a suburban street. We were also, I think, ordering an Uber and walking right past us, looking at his phone as if he was just a guy going to his house. One Elijah Wood from the Lord of the Rings films, which was pretty cool. I didn't actually see his face, but my wife went, "Oh, it's that." This is quite funny. My wife said, "Oh, it's that guy who I always mistake for Tobey Maguire." Which was funny. And I said, "That's Elijah Wood." Yeah. And then,
sorry, also
enough, back at
co-star on the TV show Wilfred as well.
Exactly right. Yes.
Yeah.
And then back at Sydney Airport, we bumped into famed director Philip Noyce, who had been in LA for a screening of his film Rabbit Proof Fence, but it turns out he caught the same flight back as us. So it was a busy week, and I've left out a whole lot of stuff which are movie adjacent. Like looking at the stars on the Hollywood Boulevard and going to Grumman's Chinese Theatre and those kind of crazy things that you do. But, and going to the LA Zoo, which was really not a very good zoo at all, but we can get into that in another podcast. So anyway, thanks for turning over the intermission to me. I had an incredible week.
Well, look, what I'd probably also recommend to people is if you are in a city like Los Angeles specifically, first of all, there's some permanent stuff you can go and see. So one of the things that I thought was probably one of the more enjoyable things, like as I mentioned, I did that Warner Brothers studio tour, which was absolutely at the top level of things that I really enjoyed there, only because you're visiting sets and you're going down the sort of streetscapes and you're just seeing a lot of the pop culture you've enjoyed sort of come alive. Like, you know, you go past the building and the person in the little Jeep thing that you drive around is like, oh, that's like the Commissioner Gordon's police headquarters from the old Batman TV show. And like, I'm looking at it going, oh my God, it absolutely is. Like, you know, stuff like that. Oh, look, there's that stoop that Josh sat on in that episode of The West Wing after he came out of hospital. You know, little moments like that. So that's always fun. And within those, they've always got little museums as well. So I mentioned seeing like a Superman costume and like a whole bunch of other stuffs. But there was also, when I was there, they had like a Batman vehicle and costume thing where you can go and see all the Batmobiles from all the various movies and TV shows and stuff over the years. So that was all pretty cool. But there's always things like the Hollywood Forever Cemetery where you can go and see where famous people are buried.
We drove past it, and I was going to say, oh, Dan told me to go to that. Yeah, Dan said go to that, but it was kind of a hot day.
Way better use of your time than going to the zoo.
I really should have.
Yeah. But like literally you go around and like the thing with Los Angeles is it's all about the visual aesthetics of a person's life. So all the gravestones are all really elaborate or really interesting, and it's not your usual cemetery. Really interesting space. I got annoyed because I believe that Estelle Getty is buried there, and I didn't get to see her or her tombstone. Yeah. So no, unfinished business. I'll have to get back there. But the other thing you can do when you're in a city like Los Angeles is that almost every night of the week, there's some sort of unexpected show that's taking place. So it could be just something that's like a comedy room or something. But there'll always be stars of yesteryear doing some sort of retrospective of something or some sort of stage play starring, you know, somebody from Three's Company or just... There's always something taking place, and pay attention to like various listings for bars and venues around the place, because you will find unexpected stuff that you will remember for years and years and years as really just worthwhile experiences. The one that I stumbled across, which was probably the best one when we were in Los Angeles, was my wife is a mad keen Futurama fan. And the week that we were there happened to be where the cast of Futurama and some of the writers do like a semi-regular, like once every like 4 or 5 years, they get on stage together and just do their favorite celebrity voices. So
Wow.
like it's just really, really just silly fun. But yeah, it was just
That
like
would be
such a
amazing.
moment where I didn't tell her what we were off to do, and then I'm just there. We're having a drink beforehand. I'm like, okay, do you actually want to know what we're doing here? And as I explained it to her, I just got to watch her head just explode, like in the moment. So that was a really fun
That's very
opportunity.
sweet of you. Look at you, you romantic bastard.
So romantic.
I
Yeah.
just want to point out very quickly to see out this segment. I got 2 books. I brought myself back the Surely You Can't Be Serious Oral History of Airplane, or as we know it here in
You know,
Australia.
you can just get that on Amazon, right?
Yeah, I can, but I was there at a place called The Last Bookstore in downtown LA, and they had this. So I'll be reading that. And I bought and will read, but will then send to you a book called Sit Ubu Sit, which I am showing to our.
Is that the David
which is
Goldberg?
Gary David Goldberg book, which I haven't read and I will read, and I hope you haven't read because I'm going to send it to you as a little gift. But oddly,
awesome.
Inside is a dedication to Gary David Goldberg, and I'm just trying to find it as we speak. He has written in here, Leslie, it's been lovely growing up next door to you. All the best, Gary. Now, I'm wondering who that might be. Leslie, who lived next to Gary David Goldberg. If any of our listeners have any idea who's Gary David Goldberg's neighbour was growing up, please get in touch with us at screenwatchingpodcast@gmail.com.